diminish from necessarily the entertainment value of it, okay? But you have to understand this is how they do it. And when I talk about music next week, I'll talk even more about how they produce the music these days. So I just want to remind you that, you know, if Robert De Niro gets on a show, you know, $775,000, you know, I got $100 in travel expense. So this is just for fun. Okay, that's what I got.
Is it okay?
Now, was it fun? Yeah, it was fun. You're never too old to have fun. I really enjoyed being on the show. It was physically enormously exhausting, and to be perfectly honest, I'm not lying, I'm glad I was knocked off after the first round, because I didn't know if I could stand up for another round, because I hadn't got any sleep the night before, and I was afraid I might actually, you know, hurt myself. But I tried again, and that's what it's entertainment. Okay, here are some common sense giveaways for if a show is truly real in real time, or whether it isn't. First of all, if you watch that segment again, and if you want, I can send you the URL for it, you'll see, you'll never hear you never hear you never hear the normal fillers that we use when we speak to each other. Now, I try to avoid using fillers when I give presentations, but they always kind of slip in. And so what happens, they cut all that stuff out in order to make it as smooth as possible. And then ask the question, how do the cameramen know to be at the exact spot to get the shot? Now, in the case of reality TV, it's pretty easy. You're pretty static in front of a stove, and you can have, there's a camera behind me, and a camera in front of me, and a camera on the side of me. You know, that was all set up. And when we lined up, there were places to line up, and they'd move us together, and they'd make sure it was absolutely perfect. But think about a reality show like The Amazing Race, or any of these action-type reality shows in the wilderness. And you see these guys trying to figure out, okay, where to go, and let's climb the mountain. And they're climbing the mountain in the middle of a jungle, and that camera's got them perfect. Yeah. Think how that possibly could happen unless it were somehow scripted, or something going on where they had people already in position to what they expect they would do. So there's a lot of this, and one could argue it is somewhat scripted that way. And those kinds of reality shows where there's location movement and so forth. And then if you're watching a reality show like The Voice or America's Got Talent, see if the contestant ever is in the same shot as the host or the judges. Now, there's been a number of articles being written about America's Got Talent and the music venue reality shows, arguing that some of these people who purportedly, you know, were suddenly discovered really were kind of professional to begin with. And so they aren't as big a surprise as suggested. And I think some of that may be true. But I even wonder if, I think the reality voice shows like America's Got Talent, or Voice, you know, indeed they perform, indeed they're judged. And I think that, but I think once the contestant gets off the stage, they may review the judging over and over to get it seamlessly. So it is real, that the judging is real and the decisions are real, but the actual visualization of it I have to believe, has been modified by multiple takes in order to get the appropriate reaction between the judges, one versus the other. Oh, that looks good. Thank you. Okay, there's some common sense. These are common sense giveaways. Okay, these are common sense giveaways of what reality TV is all about. There's academic criticism of reality TV. Some argue it's artificial. It's so artificial that it's not reality at all. Some academically have argued that it's fraudulent editing, coaching, storylines restaged for the cameras, and hence you shouldn't call it reality TV, but something else. There certainly is intent, some cases, not in my show, to humiliate participants and to create drama. And some argue these shows glamorize vulgarity and materialism, particularly the ones where you have dating situations, and certainly in the case of Trump's reality TV. Here's an example of someone who didn't go on reality TV. This is my daughter Esther, who's also a good cook. And she's in the fashion industry. And when she graduated from Syracuse University Fashion, she competed in a big fashion show and came in second. And she was asked by the Project Runway to enter it. They wanted her on Project Runway. And Esther had been watching it, and she still watches it. She says, "No, Dad, I won't go on it. You know, I'm not into humiliation." She says in the beginning, you see some really good fashions, but then they start having you do fashions made out of ridiculous materials like food and whatever. And she says it's no longer really designing. It's trying to break people down. And in those multiple shows where they're on for a long time, the contestants literally are sequestered. They don't have their cell phones. They're sequestered from their families in order to create the drama. And so, now, is it bad? I don't know if it's bad or not, but that's the way it is. That Project Runway is that kind of show. But I think that the bottom line take for me is that for most reality shows, as any shows on television, it's really about entertainment. It's about entertainment. And so one could argue that if sometimes they're contrived, they still get the entertainment value out there. And it can be argued that if people volunteer to be on these shows, they know what they're getting into. So if they're humiliated because they didn't compete properly or whatever, then that's the game. They volunteered as adults to do it. And so I would argue there's no harm done, although it's painful to watch sometimes. Now, with respect to my show, why was I knocked off? Okay, the judges didn't tell me this, but I do know that the judges actually thought I was a professional chef, probably an older guy who owned multiple restaurants, and wanted to see if he still had the chops to cook. All right? So they were really surprised that I wasn't the chef. My take of it is this. I'm an older guy. And I have much less entertainment value than Kelly, who was literally a model before she went into cooking and went to culinary school. And you could see it. She was a gorgeous woman. And she was very photogenic and knew how to play the camera. Rodolfo had that cute accent. And even a second dish, he made some really crazy mistakes. But the accent, handsome young guy. And Mike was an amazing presence on screen. He literally was a window washer. He owned a window washing company. And then if you follow the rest of the episode, you see him, doing this windows. But he did learn how to cook, and he had a personality that no one expected. Before the show began, he was so petrified. He was literally sweating buckets, and we were calming him down. It's going to be okay, Mike, once you get cooking up. But once he started cooking, his natural New York banter came in, and it was really a delight. You saw us talking while we were cooking. This was encouraged a lot. Don, say something to Kelly. Kelly, say something. They could cut out that. They wanted interaction between us, not to humiliate or anything, but just to get us to get more entertainment. When Rodolfo, I'd already finished my plating, and so did Kelly, and so did Mike, and Rodolfo was going down to the last second, and it was like a minute before. And everybody said, "Can we help you? What can we do to help you, Rodolfo? We don't want you to lose because you run out of time." And he didn't want any help, and he got it done literally on the second by taking the stuff out with his fingers. So, we were competing, but we were all friends, and we were all kind of disappointed that he even had to be a winner. Okay, what happened afterwards? Okay, Mike now still has his window washing company, but he also now is a chef in a restaurant. And so he met his goal. Kelly's disappeared. She was one of the chefs at the Meridian in Atlanta. I tried to look her up, and she's no longer there at the Meridian. So she took a risk at being on the show. And this is kind of the dark side, maybe. The chefs, if they lose to an amateur, have something really to lose. They're embarrassed, in their profession. It'd be much like if I was, or Bryce were out in the field explaining geology, and someone who was a hobbyist and a mineral collector proved that we were wrong. We'd be kind of embarrassed that, that happened. All right. And so having a window washer beat out two professional chefs with some pretty good reputations, I'm sure it was embarrassing to them. And I don't know what happened to Rodolfo. He actually was in Houston, and of course Houston got hit by the hurricane, and I haven't been able to get into contact with him. So, there's a dark side to these competitions. We have amateurs versus professionals, it makes it a whole lot more entertaining. But at the same time, it could lead to, you know, for the professionals, the amateurs, who cares, right? You win, wow, you're great. You know, there's no consequence, really. And so again, does it being completely real make a difference? There's a lot of stuff that we watch that isn't real that we get great entertainment value from. You know, the cinema is being a case. One could ask, though, would this be the ultimate? What is the ultimate reality TV? There's some dystopian stories like The Hunger Games, which I think are fabulous cinema, but they're pretty bad premise. You know, kids being slaughtered for entertainment. All right, the Arnold Schwarzenegger, The Running Man, a classic, I think Stephen King story. You know, how entertainment TV goes crazy. Of course, we have these kinds of sports now, full contact boxing or full contact fighting in a cage, which is, I think, rather reprehensible. And then Jim Carrey was in that great show where his whole life from birth was part of a reality TV show that I thought was really very scary and very interesting. So I don't know where it's going to go. And my hope it doesn't go to this dystopian and just goes in what we see. I wish there personally to be less humiliation type shows, but that's what a certain element of the public likes. The Food Network shows I think are pretty innocuous. They're kind of fun. Some of them are really silly. Having to cook on the edge of a knife a whole dinner, nonsense stuff. But again, it's for entertainment purposes. This was kind of real in that, we actually were cooking real dishes we were inventing at the time, and it worked out. So thank you very much.
Thank you.